So you have the legal sheet of paper with the big circle in the middle. That's where we're going to start. We're going to move on to the other legal sheet in just a little bit. Did everybody get a copy of this? It's upside down if the triangle's at the bottom. So you want the triangle in the top right corner. At least that's how I look at it. So we are going to start with that triangle in the top right corner. And you will need something to write with probably. All right. That triangle up at the top right represents the balanced assessment system. The balanced assessment system, state speak, came out with Senate Bill 163, 191, 212. It came out with all these laws. And what the laws said was that in our balanced assessment system, we will have a summative measure. That's the very tip of that triangle, is our summative measure. The summative measure, according to the state, is what? TCAP, PARC, CMAS. So that summative measure includes one of those tests, or all of those tests, as the case may be. And when we talk about the balanced assessment system, that is the summative assessment piece that we have in place. Underneath that, we have our interim measures. The state law says we will have interim measures in place. Many of you are using MAP or STAR, iRead. You might be using DRA2. iReady? And there's others. You may be using the district interims. Those things count for the interim measure that we have to have in place. So Cite 6, at the most basic level, by law, requires the state summative assessment, and it requires an interim measure. That's what it requires. The bottom segment of that triangle are the formative practices. It says we will have formative practices in place, those things that inform our day-to-day teaching and learning. And you will do that with kids, but it doesn't tell us what those will look like. The balanced assessment system, this triangle, we like to think about it as what's being done to us. It's what the state requires. So not the choices we make. These are outside influences. On the left-hand side of that page, you have the lines. And those lines represent the balanced assessment approach. Because in Douglas County, we don't have enough acronyms. We have the BAS and the BAA. This is the BAA, the Balanced Assessment Approach. The balanced assessment approach is what we choose to do with our kids. It's the choices we make based on the children we have in our classroom and the content we're teaching, or our goals for those kiddos. This is stage 2 of your backward plan. It is Cite 2. We still have summative practices. That's that tall line at the end. The summative practice could be a performance assessment. It could be an end-of-unit test. It could be any summative measure. What did the students learn throughout this unit? In the middle, we have a couple of shorter lines, not the shortest, but the shorter ones. And those are the interim measures that we have in place in our units. Those are the decisions we make to check where our kids are toward that learning outcome at the end, toward that summative assessment. So in the interim, our head is down, we are plugging away, the kids are plugging away, we are moving and grooving, and every so often we have to look up, lift our head up, and see where we are. How close to that target are we? And some kids may be right there, some kids may be further back. We then have to make decisions that take us out of that and differentiate our learning based on the kids' needs. We may have to slow down, we may be ready to speed up. It just depends. The shortest lines on there are all of our formative practices. So those are the thumbs up, the exit tickets. They may be informal, they may be more formal. But that's our balanced assessment approach, the decisions that we make. And when we talk balanced assessment approach, we are talking about all of our kids all of the time. This is everybody that we are in contact with. This is those kiddos and all of their learning, which becomes important. If you go back to that triangle, that's really Cite 6. And we'll talk about how these integrate and overlap in just a minute. The big circle in the middle. We are going to break this down the middle. This is our Cite evaluation. As a whole, it represents Cite 1 through 6. When we break it down the middle, on the left-hand side, is Cite 1 through 5, and that's teacher practice. We've been living with Cite 1 through 5 for quite a few years now. 2 years. In Cite 1 through 5, we've got Cite 1. What are our outcomes? We have Cite 2. How do we measure those outcomes? In the assessment office, we're concerned about Cite 2. Cite 3, instruction. Cite 4, we've got our teaching, or our culture and climate. And then Cite 5 is professionalism. So that side of the pie we're familiar with. 1, outcomes, 2, measures, 3, instruction, 4, culture and climate, 5, professionalism. Cite 2, again, is all of our kids all of the time. That's our balanced assessment approach. That goes up with the lines on the top left and that drawing at the top left. All of our kids all of the time. The right-hand side of this pie is about student performance. So we had teacher practice on the left 50%. The right 50% is all about student performance. And that is Cite 6. State law, and this is for everybody in the state, says that 50% of our educator effectiveness rating will be based off of our teacher practice. 50% of our educator effectiveness rating will be based off of student performance. So that's why the pie is divided the way it is. On the right-hand side of the pie in Cite 6, we have, again, something that state says we'll do. It's divided into 2 pieces, and those 2 pieces are individual attribution, what I do with my kids, and that's 40% of that entire pie. What I do with my kids. Then there is a collective attribution, which is 10% of the pie. That is, we are a school building, and as a building, we're responsible for all the kiddos that walk through our doors. So the collective is all of our kids.
That was 10%?
10% of the entire pie. Now, the choice to make it 40% individual, 10% collective that was left up to districts. So if you go to Littleton, they may have a different configuration. Harrison may have a different configuration. You can go around the state and you may see it flip-flopped. It may be 10% individual and 40% collective in other districts. That was a district choice. With that, the task force, there was a Cite 6 task force that was put together in 2012-13, 2013-14. They worked with Dr. Sina Morgan, and it represented teachers from all grade levels, from all roles were represented. Administrators were on there, and this was the recommendation that came out of the task force, that we wanted to have more based on what we do with our kids. We wanted that student performance to be based on that. In Cite 6, there's also 2 other options that came out of the task force. We recommend the most basic. So when schools are setting the model, The 40-10 is what we're going to recommend this year. The one I'm going to tell you right now we really don't recommend, but I'm going to put it out there. It is breaking down the 40% into 35% and 5%. 35, all my kids. 5% is a targeted group of kids. And that targeted group could be boys in writing. It could be inquiry in science. It could be my ELL kids. It could be just a special group that needs focus on one world-class outcome. It's the action research piece. We don't recommend this year because we're not sure the technology allows us to capture this, quite honestly. If you're going to fight for it and say, we want to do this, then you may have to let go at the end of the year when it comes out that the technology can't capture this yet. Okay, so just be aware of that. The collective can also be divided into two pieces. And the collective can be divided into 5% maybe grade level and 5% entire school. So if you have a common assessment that you give at second grade, you might choose to do grade level. Or you may choose to leave that as part of the individual. It's real easy to absorb that assessment into an individual one. So those were the recommendations made by the task force, is to have those 4 categories, to have the 40-10, and let it go that way. When we talk Cite 2, all of our kids all the time, that's everything we do. We do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of assessment practices throughout the year. When we talk Cite 6, we are talking like 4 of those. So don't let Cite 6 run rampant here. It is not the focus of your year. It is just a few select measures that reflect the best things that you do, the most meaningful things that you do with your kids in your class. It is not all of your practices. It is not even all of our kids. Cite 6, there'll be a decision rule made, and we don't know what this rule will be yet. But it could be 80% of our kids meet this target if they're in my class 80% of the time. So the other day we had some schools that were a higher transient population for Douglas County, and they were saying, well, what about those kids that come in April? Do we have to count them? No. They haven't been in your classroom for the majority of the school year. Okay, so Cite 6 is a sampling of our kids. It's a body of evidence. It's the best, most meaningful representations of what you do and what your kids do throughout the year. I'd like you to take a minute with that handout. There's a lot of information. And just with the shoulder partner, share what was your biggest aha, what was the best reminder, what was new, what do you think might be most valuable to take back. Have that conversation about 3 minutes.